The city never truly slept. Even at midnight, the hum of distant traffic, the faint glow of street lamps, and the occasional bark of a dog reminded you that somewhere life was still moving forward. Yet in her modest apartment on the 3rd floor of a slightly worn brick building, Sara felt a silence so deep it almost had a voice of its own. Every night she followed the same ritual. She would wash up, pour herself a cup of tea, always the same brand, always the same steeping time, and sit by the window that overlooked the narrow street below. Sometimes she imagined the lives of the people she could see. The young couple arguing softly behind drawn curtains, the old man watering his tiny balcony garden, the teenager hunched over his laptop, headphones clamped tight over his ears. Life was happening, but not here. Not in her apartment. Yet Sara had her anchor, a single thread of hope that tethered her heart against the weight of loneliness. Every night at exactly 9:45 p.m., her phone would ring once. Just once. No name. No number. Just the soft vibration and the flash of the screen. A missed call. It had started 6 months ago. John, her only son, had moved abroad for work, chasing dreams too big for a small neighborhood in a city that never stopped breathing. He had called regularly at first, video calls that left her smiling, hearing his laugh, seeing his new life unfold on the tiny screen. But as months turned into years, the calls became sporadic, then messages became rare, and eventually, silence. That first missed call, when it came, she had ignored it, thinking it a wrong number. The second night, it happened again. A single ring, a missed call. And then, for reasons she could not explain, she began to wait, to hope. Her daughter Liza lived in another city, practical, busy, considerate, but consumed by her own life. She would check in occasionally, sending messages with emojis and shorthand words, never asking about the small, quiet details that made Sara's world tick. And so the apartment remained largely silent, except for the rhythm of city life outside, and that single missed call. Tonight, like every other, Sara sat with her cup of tea, letting the warmth seep into her hands, into her chest, and into the space where hope still resided. She glanced at the clock. 9:44 p.m., 1 minute. She sipped her tea slowly, letting the steam rise in front of her face, tracing shapes she could almost believe were familiar. At 9:45, the phone vibrated. One ring. Just one. Sara's heart skipped, a familiar ache that always carried with it an impossible hope. She picked it up. Silence. She stared at the screen, blinking back tears, whispering his name under her breath. John, is that you? No answer. Just the echo of her own voice. Some nights she tried to forget the missed call. She turned off the phone, focused on a book, or tidied the small apartment. But inevitably the anticipation returned. Something about it was sacred. A small, inexplicable tether to her son, to a life she had built with her husband Jack, to the love she carried despite the miles. Sara thought back to the first time she had held John as a baby. Tiny fists, a full head of dark hair, eyes wide and curious. Jack had laughed beside her, proud and gentle. "They grow so fast," he had said, and Sara had nodded, unwilling to believe how true it would become. Jack was gone now. 3 years. His absence had carved out quiet pockets in the apartment that were never filled by the city's noise. Yet sometimes she imagined him there pouring tea beside her, whispering reminders to lock the door, or to call Liza, or just to eat something warm. And sometimes when the missed call came, she felt Jack's presence in it, as if he had left her a sign to hold on. Tonight, after the phone rang and went silent, Sara did something she had never done before. She dialed the number back, her fingers, trembled slightly over the screen, pressing the green button. The line rang once, twice, 3 times. Then a voice, distant and hesitant, but unmistakably John. "Mom?" Her hand flew to her mouth, and a gasp escaped. The tea trembled in her cup. She swallowed hard, tears spilling over the rims of her eyes. "John, is it really you?" "Yes, Mom, it's me," he said, voice rough, a mixture of exhaustion and relief. I've been meaning to call. I didn't know how to. I got busy. Life here. It's not the same." Sara laughed, a breathless, joyous sound that mingled with tears. "Oh, John, all I wanted was to hear your voice. That's all." The line went silent for a moment, and then he said softly, almost ashamed, "I should have called. I know. I let time slip away. But I thought you'd forget me." "Never," Sara whispered, shaking her head. "Never." They spoke for hours that night, through the static of international lines, sharing stories of missed birthdays, small victories, quiet sorrows. Liza called in too, bringing her own laughter and warmth. The apartment, once so silent, was suddenly filled with voices, overlapping, alive. And the next morning Sara made tea again. But this time she poured 3 cups own for herself, 1 for John, who promised to video call later, and 1 for Liza, who would come to visit next week. She placed them carefully on the table, the sunlight catching the steam, rising gently. It was an ordinary morning, but nothing felt ordinary anymore. Outside, the city roared on. Cars honked, neighbors shouted across balconies. A child cried in the distance. But inside Sara's apartment, hope had returned, tangible, warm, and real. She sat by the window looking out at the streets below. A neighbor waved from across the alley, and she waved back, smiling. The world was still moving, yes, but for the first time in a long while, she felt part of it again. Later that day, John called again, and Sara laughed as she told him about the old plant on the windowsill, the way the sun hit the kitchen in the morning, the small joys that had filled her days in his absence. He promised to visit soon, and she believed him, not as an impossible hope, but as something real, something they could build toward together. Even the missed calls didn't frighten her anymore. They became a reminder that life could surprise you, even after years of waiting. A reminder that connections, no matter how stretched by distance and time, could return, sometimes in the quietest, simplest ways. At night, she would still sit by the window with her tea. But now, she smiled when her phone rang at 9:45, knowing that life could be full of second chances. That even in the lonely hum of a city that never slept, hope could live. And sometimes, it only took 1 missed call to remind you that love, even stretched across oceans, was never truly gone. And as Sara took a sip of her tea, letting it warm her from the inside, she whispered softly to herself, "Welcome home, John." The city roared on outside, but inside her heart, everything was still peaceful, connected, and full of quiet, hopeful joy.